Have you ever wondered what happened to the wives who loved fallen angels more than they loved God's rules? Get ready to discover how their angelic husbands turned against heaven, and how these brave but foolish women suffered because of it. You'll learn why the Nephilim, the giant children born from this forbidden love, were wiped out by a terrible flood, and how Angel Michael stepped in to take charge. But the biggest shock is what he did to punish the wives afterward. Stay with us to find out how their souls became sirens, and why they still haunt our stories today. You know how sometimes one look can change everything? Well, this story is about the biggest case of love at first sight gone wrong in history. Picture this. Way up in heaven, angels were doing their thing, singing God's praises, keeping the universe running smooth. They had one job: serve God. Simple, right? But then something happened that wasn't supposed to. These mighty angels looked down at earth and saw something that made them stop in their tracks. Human women. Now, these weren't just any women. They were beautiful in a way that was different from anything in heaven. It was real, raw, and human. Here's where things get interesting. These angels, who were supposed to be above earthly desires, started feeling something new. It was like a pull they couldn't explain. Every time they looked down, that feeling got stronger. Their bright heavenly glow started getting dimmer, as thoughts they weren't supposed to have filled their minds. Down on earth, life was going on as usual. Women were living their lives, working, laughing, loving, with no idea that up above, mighty beings were breaking every rule in the book just to watch them. But something strange was happening to these women too. They felt watched, special, like something amazing was about to happen. The air felt different. You know that feeling right before a huge storm hits? That's what it was like. Everything was charged with energy, danger, and excitement, all mixed together. It was like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something big to happen. The angels knew they were playing with fire. Every time they considered leaving heaven, they remembered what they were supposed to be: God's servants, heaven's warriors. But that pull kept getting stronger. They started asking themselves questions they'd never asked before. What if we could feel what humans feel? What if we could love like they do? Their hearts, which were made to love only God, were now filled with desires they couldn't control. Each day, more angels joined in, watching the earth below. Each day, their resolve weakened a little more. The choice was tearing them apart. Stay true to their purpose, or give in to these new feelings. Everything was about to change. Heaven and earth were never meant to mix like this. But these angels who had stood by God's throne and seen the creation of stars were ready to give it all up. For what? For a chance at human love. Little did anyone know, this choice would start a chain of events that would shake both heaven and earth to their core. These angels were about to learn the hard way that some rules aren't meant to be broken, no matter how tempting to reason. The moment these angels stepped onto earth, magic happened, but not the good kind. Imagine the most beautiful person you've ever seen, then multiply that by 1,000. That's what these fallen angels looked like when they showed up. They didn't just walk, they glided. They didn't just speak. Their words sang like music. Light seemed to dance around them, making everything else look gray and boring. When they showed up in villages and towns, everyone stopped what they were doing. How could you not? It was like staring at the sun, painful to look at, but impossible to look away. The women who saw them felt something they'd never felt before. It wasn't just a crush or attraction. It was like being under a spell. These weren't just handsome strangers passing through town. They were perfect in every way, or at least they seemed to be. Their skin glowed like moonlight. Their eyes held all the stars of heaven. And when they smiled, well, that's when the trouble really started. But you know how they say, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is? That's exactly what was happening here. These weren't just super handsome men. They were angels who who had turned their backs on heaven. And if you looked closely enough, you could see something wasn't quite right. Their smiles held secrets darker than night. Their eyes, though beautiful, were ancient and deep in a way no humans could be. The women who met them felt drawn in, like moths to a flame. It wasn't fair, really. How do you say no to someone who literally glows with heavenly light? Who knows everything about you before you even speak? Who can promise you things no human man ever could? But here's the scary part. The more time these women spent with the fallen angels, the more they changed too. It's like they caught some of that otherworldly glow. They started seeing things differently. Normal life wasn't enough anymore. Regular men looked plain and boring compared to these heavenly beings. The fallen angels knew exactly what they were doing. They picked the most beautiful women, the ones who caught their eye from heaven. They used their heavenly powers to appear as everything these women had ever dreamed of. It was like a fairy tale romance, but with a horror story twist. Every time one of these angels took a human wife, it sent ripples through both heaven and earth. These weren't just regular marriages. They were unions that were never supposed to happen. And the children that would come from these marriages, well, that's where our story takes an even darker turn. Now let me tell you about the children of these forbidden marriages, the Nephilim. Imagine a child being born, but instead of staying tiny and cute, they just keep growing and growing and growing. These weren't your average kids. They were giants with strength that could move mountains and appetites that could empty villages. When a Nephilim walked, the ground shook. When they spoke, their voices boomed like thunder. They were born with their angel father's power and their human mother's feelings, but none of the wisdom to handle either. Picture a toddler having a tantrum. Now make that toddler the size of a house. Scary, right? Cities lived in fear of these giants. Regular people didn't stand a chance. The Nephilim took what they wanted, ate what they wanted, and destroyed anything in their path. Some were as tall as trees, others even bigger. They weren't just big, they were smart too. And that made them even more dangerous. Up in heaven, God watched all this happening. His perfect world was being turned upside down by these hybrid creatures who were never supposed to exist. His anger grew day by day as he saw how these giants terrorized his creation. The humans he loved so much were living in constant fear, hiding in their homes, praying for help. That's when heaven's greatest warriors, the archangels, knew they had to step in. But even for them, this wasn't going to be easy. Fighting a Nephilim was like fighting a force of nature. They were practically unstoppable, and there were so many of them. The archangels gathered their armies. They knew this would be the biggest battle they'd ever fought. Michael, Gabriel, and the others planned their attack carefully. They couldn't just rush in. These weren't demons they were fighting. These were creatures with angel blood in their veins. But here's the thing about having God on your side. You get backup plans, big ones. When the archangels realized even they might not be enough to stop the Nephilim, God decided to step in himself. He had a plan that would change the world forever, a flood that would wash away all the evil that had spread across the earth. The battle that followed was like nothing the world had ever seen. Heaven's armies against the mighty Nephilim, with the biggest flood in history on the way. Lightning split the sky, thunder shook the mountains, and rain began to fall. The Nephilim, for the first time ever, felt something they'd never felt before: fear. It was about to become clear to everyone, angels, humans, and Nephilim alike, that some lines should never have been crossed. But before we proceed, have you subscribed to the channel already? If not, do it right now, because we publish amazing Bible content weekly that will enhance your knowledge about Scripture and the events within it. What are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button right now. Have you ever seen storm clouds gather so dark that day turns to night? Well, multiply that by 1,000,000. That's how it started. The day God decided enough was enough. The sky didn't just darken. It turned black as ink. The air got so heavy you could barely breathe. At first, people didn't think much of it. Rain was normal, right? But this was different. The raindrops were thick and heavy, like tears from heaven itself. They didn't fall, they crashed down, hour after hour, day after day. The rain just kept coming. No breaks, no letting up, just endless water, falling from an angry sky. The mighty Nephilim, who had terrorized everyone for so long, started to look scared for the first time. These giants who could crush boulders with their bare hands couldn't do anything against the rising water. They tried climbing the highest mountains, but the flood just kept climbing higher. Their strength meant nothing now. Nature itself had turned against them. You could hear the screams everywhere. People begging for mercy, crying out to heaven. The fallen angels watched helplessly as their children, these powerful beings they had created, struggled against the flood. But there was nothing they could do. This was God's punishment, and no power in heaven or earth could stop it. In the middle of all this chaos, one boat floated safely, Noah's Ark. Imagine being on that ark, hearing the storm rage outside, feeling the waves toss you around like a toy. Inside were the only humans and animals that would survive this worldwide cleanup. They could hear the desperate cries of those outside dying, but they couldn't help. This was God's plan, and they had to trust it. The water rose higher and higher. First, it covered the fields, then the forests, then the hills. Even the tallest mountains disappeared under the endless waves. The Nephilim, those mighty giants who once seemed unstoppable, were now just another thing for the flood to sweep away. Their incredible strength couldn't save them from drowning. The fallen angels could only watch from their chains as everything they had built, everyone they had loved, disappeared under the water. Their perfect children, their human wives, the cities they had helped build, all gone. The world they had corrupted was being washed clean. For 40 days and 40 nights, water fell from the sky. When it finally stopped, the world was just one giant ocean. No mountains, no valleys, no cities, just water as far as the eye could see. The only sign of life was Noah's Ark, floating alone on the endless sea. When the waters finally started going down, they revealed a completely different world. Everything the Nephilim had built was gone. It was like hitting a giant reset button on Earth. But for some, especially the wives of the fallen angels, an even worse punishment was about to begin. When the floodwaters finally disappeared, you'd think the worst was over. But for some, it was just the beginning. Remember those women who fell in love with the fallen angels? They survived the flood, but maybe that wasn't a blessing after all. Picture this. You've loved someone with all your heart, someone perfect, someone powerful, only to watch them be dragged away in chains. That's what happened to these women. Their angel husbands, once so mighty and beautiful, were now bound in darkness. Some were chained in deep valleys, others trapped in spiritual prisons. They couldn't help their wives anymore, couldn't protect them, couldn't even hold them. The wives, they were left alone to face what they'd done. Some of them broke down completely. Imagine realizing your choices helped bring about the end of the world. That's a heavy guilt to carry. They fell to their knees, begging God to forgive them. They cried until they had no tears left. But not everyone felt sorry. Take Naamah, for example. Beautiful, proud. Naamah, even after everything, she wouldn't back down. She had gotten drunk on her own beauty and power, using them to lead others astray. Even now, she stood tall, refusing to admit she was wrong. Her pride became her prison. God's punishment was creative and cruel. These women were turned into sirens. You know those creatures who lure sailors to their doom? Yeah, that was them. cursed to be beautiful, but deadly. Just like the angels they had loved, forever drawing others into destruction. Just as they had been drawn in themselves. The psychological damage was intense. These women had to live with crushing guilt. Knowing their choices helped destroy the world. Some went mad with grief. Others became empty shells of who they used to be. The weight of what they'd done was too heavy to bear. And their angel husbands, chained up in their prisons, they could sense everything. They felt their wives' pain, their despair, their madness, but they couldn't do anything about it. Talk about torture. Meanwhile, the angels who had stayed faithful to God, they were given a new job, watching over this changed world. They had to make sure nothing like this ever happened again. They watched the Sirens, once their sisters-in-law, singing their deadly songs. They watched humanity rebuild, trying to forget the terror of the flood. It was a new chapter for everyone. The world had been washed clean, but the scars remained. The faithful angels kept their distance now, watching, but never interfering. They had learned their lesson. Some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed, no matter how tempting the reason. But there's one incident that'll blow your mind, a fight between two of the most powerful beings ever, Michael and Lucifer. And what were they fighting over? Moses' body. Yeah, you heard that right. The same Moses who parted the Red Sea. But this isn't just any regular fight. This battle was so important. It was kept hidden in a 3,000-year-old Bible that most people don't even know exists. Want to know what made Michael so angry that he had to face Lucifer himself? Or why Lucifer wanted Moses' body so badly? Trust me, what happened next changed everything we know about these powerful beings. Click on the video popping up on your screen right now. You won't believe what really went down between heaven's greatest warrior and its greatest traitor. This is one Bible story they definitely didn't teach you in Sunday school. If this story shook you, you're not alone. The tale of the fallen angels and Nephilim and the women who loved them is one of the most haunting and hidden chapters in all of ancient scripture. It reminds us that every choice we make echoes through eternity, that love, when misused, can lead to ruin, and that even beauty can be a curse when it defies the divine. But most of all, it reminds us that God sees everything, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, always comes. If this video moved you, enlightened you, or even gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We post deep biblical stories and spiritual truths every week that will challenge what you thought you knew. And remember, God doesn't just write stories. He writes destinies. Stay faithful, stay curious. And as always, God bless you. And we'll see you in the next one.